my grip comes together.
Black Sheep Ammunition and Defender brings to you Handgun Safety 101.
Let's do a quick safety brief. So number one is guns pointed in a safe direction all the time. Whether the gun is loaded or not, you keep it pointed in a safe direction all the time. And the reason that we do that is we want to build a conditioned response that anytime that gun is in our hand, we're aware of where it's pointed. If it's an empty gun, we still treat it like it's a hot gun because we want that conditioned response in our brain that if a gun's in our hand, we're being careful with it. The other thing is that you should hold the gun in your hand the same way that you use it when you're moving it around. If you're moving a gun around, the slide should be back, your finger should be way out of the trigger. So the thing about triggers that I talk about on my range is different from a lot of ranges. A lot of ranges don't allow you to put your finger in the trigger until you're on sights. I think in the real world that's not a good idea, and the reason for that is if we continually never put our finger in the trigger guard until we're on sights, these are defensive tools. And in a defensive situation, time is very, very important. There's a real possibility that you might actually not put your finger in the trigger soon enough. So on my range, you can put your finger in the trigger as soon as the gun is pointed at the target. And then the last thing is being aware of what's behind where we're shooting. In the real world, we don't have the luxury of having a closed off area and somebody watching to make sure that nobody is back in the impact area. But here, we do have that. At the same time, in the real world, we don't have that situation. So we should be situationally aware all of the time out in the real world. If I could teach you to be situationally aware, or I could teach you how to shoot like John Wick, you'd be safer being continually situationally aware. That is the most important thing you can do to stay safe in today's world. So, let's talk about the principles of shooting a handgun. In the old days, we talked about all kinds of things like breath control and where our feet were and things like that. In reality, there's really only three things that really make a difference in shooting a handgun. Three things: grip, sights, and trigger. So let's talk about grip first. Grip should be high on the gun, as high as I can get on the gun this way, and here, and here. And I want to grip this gun from front to back hard enough that it changes the color of my nail bed. So that's my right-handed grip, and I can operate that gun with this hand, but I'm going to operate the gun better if I use both hands. So notice where this finger is. When my finger's out of the trigger, this finger is up here high and away. There's a reason for that. Other people can see that you're out of the trigger guard. It's kind of a reminder. It's kind of an exaggerated movement, makes you more aware of what's going on. And then the next thing that happens is we put on our other hand. So really good shooters all use the same grip, and it's not the same grip that we taught years ago. Everything in life changes, right? The way that people train for all kinds of athletic events, we find out that certain things work better than other things. So grip is one of the things that's evolved over a period of time. And all the guys that are truly good shooters grip the gun the same way. I've been to 3 World Shooting Championships. They put me in the squad with the very best guys, and I watch what those guys do. All of them use a high thumbs forward grip. That's what we call this. So this thumb on my support hand goes opposite my index finger, and then this thick pad here at the base of my thumb goes in this open area on the side of the gun. So when I put that together, this is what I have. So I'm gripping the gun front to back with this hand, right to left with this hand, and I have really strong control over the firearm. And gripping the gun hard and tight like this can make the gun more reliable. If you have a relatively lightweight gun and you don't hold that gun hard enough, you can actually cause a malfunction because the gun has to have resistance to fully cycle the recoil spring. So you've got to hold a gun hard enough to make it operate. So that's grip, high thumbs forward. Now let's talk about this thumb. Everybody wants to bear down with this thumb. Everybody wants to put this thumb down. They think that it helps their grip. So I keep a pair of vice grip pliers on my table and I set them up really hard. So I want you to watch when I close these things. Did I use my thumb? No. Our grip is from this part of our hand to this part of our hand. That's our grip. Front to back with this hand, right to left with this hand. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to shoot a quick second shot or third shot or whatever if we need to, because it's kind of a tension thing. If we've got tension in our grip, it's almost like the gun's pushing against a spring, and if you push against a spring and release, the spring goes back to where it was before, and that's the principle behind doing that. One other thing that's going to help you with grip and make you a lot more solid and manage recoil better is that once you press the gun out, you rotate your elbows out a little bit like this, and if you do that, you'll feel the gun tighten up at the top and the bottom. So that kind of covers grip. Now let's talk about sights. So sights are very important, but they're still not the most important thing. Grip is important in you being able to shoot relatively fast. You can grip the gun really badly and still be accurate. Grip, it allows you to shoot a fast follow-up shot, a proper grip. It's also going to make the gun more reliable, as we talked about. So sights are important in that they are what interface where the bullet goes with where you are. They orient the gun towards the center of whatever you're shooting at. I used to tell people that when they looked at sights, they should focus on the front sight. But I was a marksmanship guy, and marksmanship's a little bit different from personal defense. In marksmanship, we focused on the front sight and we allowed the target to be blurred because our vision is limited. We can only focus in a specific place, and if there's a wide variation between how far the target is and how close the gun is, that means we can only focus sharp on one of those two things. In a defensive situation, though, you're going to be focused on the target, right? When the guy with red eyes, green teeth, and a machete is threatening you and moving in your direction, you're not likely to focus on the sights. You're going to be focusing on the target. So the idea is to look at the target through the sights. So if we look at the target through the sights, we've got an adequate sight picture, especially in a defensive situation. Defensive situations very rarely happen at long distances. Generally, they're less than 3 yards. That's remarkably close. As a matter of fact, at 3 yards, we really probably don't need sights. But proper sights is just lining up the sight. This is a dummy gun. I just line up this sight so that the top of this front sight is level with the top of the rear sight. And when I've done that, that's a sight picture. I put that in the center of the target. The really important thing, grip's important, sights are important. The really important thing in being able to shoot a gun is trigger. Trigger is why people miss. We used to talk about recoil anticipation. Recoil anticipation was our explanation for why the gun moved when people pull the trigger. I've decided that it's not recoil. I've decided it's noise. And the reason I've decided that is because I train a lot of people to shoot, and people flinch when they shoot guns that have almost no recoil at all. 22s have no recoil. People flinch with 22s. People flinch with AR-15s. AR-15s don't have recoil. They make a lot of noise, though. And noise is what makes us flinch. So if you were in the room with me right now and I picked this up, you would look at this thing and you'd start feeling uncomfortable because everybody hates the sound that this thing makes. And I use this as a prop because I make people uncomfortable with it, and I wave it around like this. And, you know, you're watching this on a video. It's not going to be uncomfortable, but you probably are thinking, man, I'm not there, because nobody likes to hear, right? We don't like to hear that noise. The reason we don't like to hear noise is it's kind of ingrained into the primitive part of our brain. Our brain is a lot of different parts, and this left side of our brain is the decision-making part, and this rear part of our brain is the primitive animal part of our brain. So when we were sitting around a campfire and we had hair growing all over us and we heard a twig snap out in the forest, we reacted to that sound. We still react to a truly loud sound. It's an involuntary response. The medical term for it is a withdrawal reflex. It's like if I touch something that's hot, I don't need to move my hand a long ways away from it, but if I touch something that's hot, I do like this, I jerk my hand back. That's a withdrawal reflex. So we do that when we hear the sound of the gun. So if somebody else shoots and you jump and your eyes blink, there's a high probability that when you're making the decision to make the gun go off, you're going to jump right before the gun goes off. And you can't see it because it happens so fast. And chances are, if you jump, you're probably going to close your eyes at the same time that you jump. So the trick to shooting a gun accurately, it is the key. It is the thing that, it's the reason people come back to me. People come to me and they say, wow, you know, this was amazing. I learned so much. The trick is to not know the exact instant the gun's going to go off. So we used to call it a surprise break. And that kind of made sense. We kind of focused on it being a surprise break, not knowing the exact instant the gun's going to go off. But in reality, that is the whole thing. So when we talk about doing that, so I've cleared my gun here. If we look at the trigger, we've got this movement in the trigger. Maybe the other side's going to work better. I'm not going to point the gun at the camera. All right, maybe the other side's going to work better. So when that finger works like this part of this trigger movement is just take up. It has nothing to do with the gun going off. And in a defensive situation, what should happen is as soon as we know that we've got a legal right to defend ourselves, that we're under threat of death, great bodily harm, or sexual assault, that gun should come out and we should go to this part of the trigger, and we call this the wall, okay? So there's a tremendous amount of difference between the pressure it takes to get to the wall and the pressure it takes to make the gun fire. It's kind of like your brake pedal on your car. So if you're stopping your car and you put your foot on the brake pedal, you have a little bit of free movement. Nothing happens at all. And then as you begin to press through, you feel the resistance of the brake pedal, and then that's where the car begins to stop. It's very similar to a trigger because this is that free play before I feel the resistance of the brake pedal, and then I want to press through that trigger the same way I press down on that brake pedal, because if I slam my foot down on the brake pedal, I'm going to spill that box of donuts I've got sitting on the front seat of the car, right? I want to just press down. I want to be able to stop the car in the distance that I have to stop the car. That means I don't want to stop a long time before I get to the other car. I want to come right up to that car, and the minimum amount of pressure that I put on that brake pedal means I've got the most controlled stop, the most disruption of the car. So I press the trigger the same way. If I need to make a panic stop in a car, I press harder and faster than I would if I was just pulling up to a stoplight. If I'm in a situation where I need to shoot the gun quickly, I'm going to press harder and faster. But if I need to be accurate with the gun, I'm going to do a slow increase in pressure to disturb the gun the minimum amount. So once I press that trigger, I'm going to go right back out into the reset. So I won't get a real reset out of this because there's not a round in the gun. So if you'll watch my finger on the trigger, notice how much finger I've got in the trigger too. I've got a lot of finger in the trigger. And the reason I have a lot of finger in the trigger is because the closer the fulcrum is to the weight that's being moved, then the more power it has. So if I get closer in, I've got more control of the trigger. So once I'm on that wall on the trigger, I just press through. You saw the trigger move a little bit, it broke, and the gun went off. And I did not know when it was going to happen, right? That's what I want. I don't want to know the exact instant the gun goes off. It may be a quarter of a second, but I don't want to know exactly. So, once I have pulled that trigger though, I want to go back out and back to the wall on the trigger. Now, this is something that I did bad. For years, I taught people to shoot from the reset. I told them to pin the trigger to the rear and then go back out until it clicked and then pin the trigger to the rear again. And that worked when I was shooting an M14, but it doesn't work with a pistol. It works, but it's not the best way. The reason it's not the best way is, for one, it takes longer to pin the trigger to the rear and then go up until I feel that click than it does to, when the gun breaks, just go out and back in as fast as I can get back to the wall. The other thing is that if I am pinning that trigger and then I'm coming back out and I get to the wall, and by that time I've got my sight picture put together, I'm very likely to, as soon as my sight picture is there and I get that click from the reset, just press the trigger again. And if I do that, I know exactly when the gun's going to go off. And I'm likely to shoot low and left if I'm right-handed, low and right if I'm left-handed. So the trigger is the most important part of the whole thing. The trigger is at least 80% of being accurate with the pistol. Almost everybody can see the gun well enough, see the sights well enough. Almost everybody can hold the gun still enough. The problem is that they slap the trigger, their brain knows that the gun is getting ready to go off, and they flinch before it happens. So that's the big part of it. The other part of it is it takes a little bit of time to get accustomed to doing that. Remember the first day of driver's ed, how you had to think through the process continually? You were thinking about every aspect of what you were doing. You had to think. You got in the car and you looked down and you said, there's the gas pedal, there's the brake pedal, and I'm not going to be able to look when I'm driving. Had somebody pulled out in front of you on that first day of driver's ed, most likely you'd have hit them, right? Because you had to consciously think about what you were doing. You had to do it in verbal thought, consciously thinking about, my foot comes off the gas, my foot goes to the brake pedal. When you learn how to shoot, you do that as well. So if that's the case, then eventually we get to the point where we can do those things without thinking about them, because you never think about what you're doing when you're driving a car. When you're driving a car, you're going down the road and you're adjusting the air conditioning, carry on a conversation with another person, brake lights come on in the car in front of you and you're on the brake pedal. You don't think brake pedal, you don't think take my foot off the gas, it just happens. The goal is to get to the point where you operate the gun the way you drive the car. If you do that, you have the ability to defend yourself if something bad happens. That's the whole kick, guys. That's the fundamentals, and the fundamentals have to be repeated. Repetition is the mother of skill. So, be safe, learn how to shoot the right way, and pay attention to what's going on around your world. Be situationally aware all the time.
Black Sheep Ammunition is partnered with Lewis Creek Shooting School with legendary shooting coach Dick Jones.